Maloo was a village blessed with fertile lands, flowing rivers, and towering trees that whispered ancient secrets to those who listened. In this peaceful land lived a young girl named Zihara. She was the only daughter of Baba Olumo, a highly respected herbalist known for his healing knowledge, and Mama Kalia, a woman whose kindness touched everyone in the village. Their small but happy family lived in harmony, and Zihara was the light of her parents' lives. But fate can be cruel. One fateful season, a terrible illness spread through the land, and despite Baba Olumo's efforts, Mama Kalia fell gravely ill. Zihara sat by her mother's side, day and night, hoping for a miracle, but the gods remained silent. One cold morning, Mama Kalia took her last breath, leaving Baba Olumo and Zihara in a world that suddenly felt empty. Baba Olumo, once a strong and wise man, was shattered. His sorrow weighed him down, and in his grief, he became distant, lost in memories of his beloved wife. Without her mother's gentle hands to guide her, Zihara felt alone. Though the villagers sympathized with her, they could not fill the void Mama Kalia had left. She clung to her father, but he was no longer the same. He still loved her, but his heart ached, and his mind was clouded by sadness. In time, Baba Olumo began to believe that Zihara needed a mother's care, someone to teach her the ways of a woman and look after their home. And so, when a woman named Sajida from a distant village came into his life, he saw her as an answer to his prayers. At first, Sajida appeared kind and gentle, speaking in soft tones and smiling warmly at Zihara. She brought her own daughter, Tazira, a girl the same age as Zihara, and promised to love them both equally. Baba Olumo, desperate for his family to be whole again, believed her words without question. But Zihara felt uneasy. Something in Sajida's eyes was cold and calculating, something she couldn't explain. She hoped she was wrong. She hoped this woman would bring love back into their home. But as soon as Baba Olumo turned his back, Sajida's true nature was revealed. The warm smiles vanished, replaced by sharp glares. The gentle voice became harsh commands. She treated Zihara as if she were nothing, making her do all the house chores while Tazira sat comfortably, eating the best food and wearing the finest clothes. Zihara's soft hands became rough from scrubbing floors. Her back ached from carrying heavy water pots, and her heart grew heavy with sadness. Baba Olumo, blinded by love, did not see what was happening. Sajida made sure he only saw what she wanted him to see, an obedient wife and a well-managed household. Whenever he was around, she pretended to be caring, speaking kindly to Zihara, even offering her small gifts. But the moment he left, the kindness disappeared like smoke in the wind. Zihara tried to tell her father, but each time she gathered the courage, Sajida would twist the truth. "She is just struggling to accept me," she would say sweetly. "She misses her mother, and I understand." Baba Olumo, still drowning in his grief, believed Sajida's lies. Zihara soon realized that no one would come to her rescue. She was alone in her suffering. As time passed, Sajida's cruelty grew worse. She gave Zihara nothing but scraps to eat, while Tazira feasted on rich meals. When Zihara's clothes became torn and small, Sajida refused to give her new ones, forcing her to wear rags while Tazira paraded in bright, beautiful garments. Some villagers noticed the difference but dared not interfere. Sajida had a sharp tongue and a cruel heart, and those who crossed her regretted it. At night, Zihara often lay awake, staring at the roof, wondering if her mother was watching from the heavens. Did she see her suffering? Would this pain ever end? She dreamed of escaping, of running far away, but she had nowhere to go. Maloo was her home, and her father, despite his blindness to the truth, was still the only family she had left. So she endured, hoping that one day things would change. But she had no idea that her worst nightmare was yet to come. A year had passed since Mama Kalia's death, but the pain in Baba Olumo's heart remained fresh. He was no longer the strong and confident man he once was. His face, once full of warmth, now carried deep lines of sorrow. The house felt empty, without Mama Kalia's laughter. And though Zihara tried her best to keep things together, she was just a young girl. Baba Olumo believed that what they needed was a woman's touch, someone who could bring back the joy that had been lost. Then came Sajida, a woman from a distant village. She was beautiful and graceful, with a voice as soft as the evening breeze. When she spoke, her words were gentle, full of understanding and kindness. She told Baba Olumo that she too had known sorrow. She was a widow, left to care for her daughter alone. Her story touched Baba Olumo's heart, and in her, he saw a second chance at happiness. At first, Zihara was hopeful. Maybe this woman would be kind. Maybe she would fill the empty space left by Mama Kalia. When Sajida arrived at their home with her daughter Tazira, Zihara greeted them with respect. Tazira was her age, and for a brief moment, she imagined having a sister, someone to share secrets and laughter with. Sajida smiled warmly at her and placed a gentle hand on her cheek. "You are such a beautiful girl, Zihara," she said sweetly. "I will love you as if you were my own." For a short time, things seemed peaceful. Sajida cooked delicious meals, spoke kindly to Baba Olumo, and even brushed Zihara's hair in the evenings. Baba Olumo was happier than he had been in a long time, and seeing his smile again made Zihara believe that perhaps things would be all right. But that illusion shattered the moment Baba Olumo left the house. As soon as his footsteps faded into the distance, Sajida's warm smile disappeared. Her soft voice turned cold. Her kind eyes hardened like stone. She looked at Zihara with a glare that sent chills down the girl's spine. "Listen to me, you little rat," Sajida hissed. "This is my house now, and you will do as I say." Zihara was too shocked to respond. Where was the kind woman who had promised to love her? Where was the gentle mother Baba Olumo had married? Before she could understand what was happening, Sajida grabbed her by the arm and dragged her into the kitchen. "From now on, you will do all the chores," she ordered. "You will cook, you will clean, and you will serve me and my daughter. Do you understand?" Tazira, who had been silent before, now smirked at Zihara. "Mother, I want fresh fruit," she said, her voice dripping with arrogance. "Then Zihara will fetch it for you," Sajida replied without hesitation. "Go now." Confused and frightened, Zihara obeyed. She ran to the market, bought the fruit with the few coins Sajida had given her, and hurried back home. She hoped this was just a bad day, that things would return to normal, but they never did. Each passing day, Sajida's cruelty became worse. She never lifted a finger to help around the house, nor did she allow Tazira to do any work. Instead, everything was left for Zihara. From sunrise to sunset, she scrubbed floors, washed clothes, fetched water, and cooked meals she was barely allowed to eat. Tazira, dressed in fine clothes, sat back and watched, laughing whenever Zihara struggled. At night, when Baba Olumo returned home, Sajida would put on her mask again. She would greet Zihara sweetly in front of him, acting as though she cared for her. "Oh, my dear Zihara worked so hard today," she would say, pretending to be proud. "She is such a good girl." Baba Olumo, blinded by love and trust, believed every word. "That is good," he would say, smiling. "I'm glad you two are getting along." But Zihara knew the truth. Behind Baba Olumo's back, Sajida treated her like a servant. She scolded her for the smallest mistakes, denied her food when she was too slow, and humiliated her in front of Tazira. She spoke to her with cruelty, reminding her every day that she was nothing, that she was unwanted. Zihara wanted to tell her father. She wanted to beg him to see what was happening, but she was afraid. Every time she tried, Sajida would tighten her grip on her arm and whisper, "If you say one word, I will make your life even worse." And so, Zihara kept silent. She endured the suffering, hoping that one day her father would see the truth. But deep down, she feared that day would never come. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. But for Zihara, every day felt the same: endless work, cruel words, and silent suffering. From the moment the sun rose, she was up before anyone else, sweeping the floors, fetching water, and preparing breakfast. But while the delicious food filled the air with mouth-watering aromas, Zihara was rarely allowed to eat more than a few scraps. Sajida and Tazira would sit at the table, enjoying warm, rich meals, while Zihara stood in the corner, stomach growling, watching them feast. If she was lucky, she would be given leftover bones or hardened bread that even the village dogs would have turned away from. Her once beautiful clothes, which Mama Kalia had sewn with love, became rags. Sajida refused to give her anything new, saying, "Why waste good clothes on a worthless girl?" Meanwhile, Tazira wore the finest dresses, each one more beautiful than the last. She would twirl in front of Zihara, showing off her jewelry and soft fabrics, laughing as if Zihara were nothing more than a beggar. The house, once warm and welcoming, became a prison. Zihara was no longer a daughter. She was a servant, forced to clean, cook, and work from morning till night. Sajida found pleasure in making her life miserable. She would spill food on the floor and order Zihara to clean it up. If Zihara took too long to finish her chores, Sajida would slap her or pull her ear, scolding her for being lazy. "You are lucky I let you stay in this house," she would sneer. "If it were up to me, I would throw you into the streets where you belong." But the worst part of it all was Baba Olumo's blindness to her suffering. He still loved his daughter, But he was too wrapped up in Sajida's sweet lies to see the truth. Sajida had mastered the art of deception. Whenever Baba Olumo was home, she acted like a kind and caring mother. She would pat Zihara's head, smile at her, and say, "My dear Zihara is such a hard worker. She is learning so much under my care." Baba Olumo, believing that his daughter was being raised with love, would nod approvingly and thank Sajida for taking such good care of her. Zihara wanted to scream the truth, to tell her father what was really happening when he was not around. But fear held her back. Sajida had warned her many times. "If you tell him, I will make your life even worse," she had whispered in her ear, her fingers digging into Zihara's arm. "And he will never believe you. He loves me, not you." And so, Zihara remained silent, swallowing her pain and hiding her tears. At night, when everyone else was asleep in their warm beds, she would sit outside on the cold ground, hugging her knees and staring at the sky. Sometimes, she imagined that her mother was up there among the stars watching over her. "Mama, why did you leave me?" she would whisper. "I am trying to be strong, but I don't know how much longer I can take this." Some nights, Sajida would lock her out of the house completely, forcing her to sleep outside with only the stars as her blanket. The nights were cold, and the ground was hard, but Zihara had no choice. She would curl up in a corner, shivering, listening to the sounds of the night, the hoot of an owl, the distant howls of wild dogs, and the quiet whispers of the wind. Yet, despite everything, she refused to break. Deep inside her, a small flame of hope still burned. She did not know when or how, but she believed that one day her suffering would end. One day she would be free. But little did she know, the worst was yet to come. As the years passed, Zihara's suffering only grew worse. She was no longer the bright and cheerful girl she had once been. Her body had grown thin from hunger, her hands rough from endless work, and her heart heavy with sorrow. But through it all, she held on, hoping that one day her father would see the truth. Then, one fateful day, Baba Olumo fell ill. At first, it was just a simple cough, nothing to be worried about. But soon, it worsened. His once strong body weakened, and he could barely get out of bed. The villagers came with herbs and prayers, but nothing seemed to help. Sajida, pretending to be the concerned wife, sat by his bedside, but deep inside, she was smiling. This was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. With Baba Olumo too weak to protect Zihara, she could finally get rid of the girl once and for all. Sajida wasted no time. She went into the village and began spreading lies. "Ever since Zihara was born, misfortune has followed this family," she whispered to the elders. "First, her mother died. Now, Baba Olumo is sick. Can't you see? That girl is cursed." Some villagers shook their heads, unwilling to believe such a thing, but others listened. Sajida was clever with her words, planting fear in their hearts. "If we don't do something," she continued, "this sickness will spread. Who knows what other tragedies she will bring." Back at home, Zihara had no idea what Sajida was planning. She sat beside her father, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "Baba, please drink some water," she whispered, her voice full of worry. Baba Olumo opened his eyes and looked at his daughter. He wanted to say something to comfort her, but he was too weak. All he could do was squeeze her hand gently before falling back into a restless sleep. That night, Sajida decided it was time to act. She shook Tazira awake and whispered, "It's time." Tazira, excited by her mother's plan, quickly got up. Together, they went to Zihara's small sleeping space in the corner of the house. "Wake up," Sajida ordered, shaking her roughly. Zihara sat up, rubbing her tired eyes. "What is it?" she asked, confused. "We need your help," Sajida said sweetly. "Your father is very sick. We must go and collect a special herb from the forest. It will cure him." At the mention of her father, Zihara immediately stood up. "I will do anything to help Baba," she said, her heart filled with hope. Without another word, Sajida grabbed a small lantern, and the three of them stepped out into the night. The village was quiet, the only sound coming from the crickets and the rustling leaves in the wind. Zihara followed them blindly, not realizing she was walking toward her doom. The deeper they went into the forest, the darker and colder it became. Tall trees surrounded them like silent giants, their branches casting eerie shadows on the ground. Zihara clutched her arms, shivering slightly. "How much farther?" she asked. "Just a little more," Sajida replied, her voice unusually calm. Minutes passed, and still they walked. Zihara began to feel uneasy. Something was not right. She turned to look at Sajida and Tazira, and for the first time, she noticed the strange smirks on their faces. A chill ran down her spine. Are we really here for herbs? She asked cautiously. Sajida stopped walking and turned to face her. The warm, motherly act was gone. Her eyes, cold and full of hatred, bore into Zihara's soul. You are such a foolish girl, she said with a cruel laugh. Did you really think I would keep you around forever? Zihara's heart pounded. What do you mean? Tazira stepped forward, crossing her arms. You should have died long ago, just like your mother, she sneered. It's time we finish what should have been done years ago. Panic set in. Zihara took a step back, but Sajida grabbed her by the wrist and yanked her forward. No one will ever find you out here, Sajida whispered, a wicked smile stretching across her face. Say goodbye, Zihara. Terror filled Zihara's chest as she realized the truth. They were not here to collect herbs. They were here to get rid of her forever. Zihara's hands trembled as she stood in the darkness of the forest, her heart pounding in her chest. The cold wind whispered through the trees, and the only light came from the flickering lantern that Sajida held. She took a step back, but Sajida grabbed her arm and shoved a wooden stick into her hands. Start digging, Sajida ordered, her voice cold and emotionless. Zihara's breath caught in her throat. Dig, she whispered, looking at the ground in front of her. Tazira smirked, crossing her arms. Yes, dig. Dig your own grave. Zihara's whole body went numb with fear. No, please, Mama Sajida, I have done nothing wrong, she cried, falling to her knees. Sajida's eyes burned with hatred. You are nothing but bad luck. I should have done this long ago, she snapped. Then, with a swift kick, she sent Zihara sprawling onto the damp earth. Start digging, or I will make it worse for you. Tears streamed down Zihara's face as she clutched the stick in her shaking hands. She knew there was no way out. If she refused, they would beat her. If she ran, they would catch her. With no other choice, she began to dig. The earth was cold and hard beneath her hands, but she forced herself to keep going. Every movement felt like a nightmare, as if she were carving out her own fate. Hours seemed to pass, though in reality, it was only moments. Her arms ached, her fingers bled, and her whole body shook with exhaustion. She turned to Sajida, her eyes pleading. Please don't do this, she sobbed. I will leave. I will go far away and you will never see me again. Sajida only laughed. Oh, I know I will never see you again, she said, her voice dripping with cruelty. That is the whole point. Before Zihara could react, Sajida and Tazira grabbed her and shoved her into the hole. She hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of her lungs. She tried to scramble up, but Tazira kicked dirt into her face, making her cough and choke. No, please, help! Zihara screamed, clawing at the walls of the pit. But Sajida and Tazira showed no mercy. They shoveled dirt over her, covering her arms, her legs, her body. Zihara thrashed, desperate to escape. But the soil was too heavy. The more she struggled, the harder it became to breathe. The world grew darker as dirt filled her nose and mouth, stealing the last bit of air from her lungs. Above her, Sajida smiled with satisfaction as she patted the soil down with her foot. It's done, she said, wiping her hands. Now, no one will ever ask about that cursed girl again. Tazira giggled. What if someone finds the grave? Sajida smirked. No one will look for her, and if they do, they will only find an empty pit. With that, the two women turned and disappeared into the forest, leaving behind nothing but silence. Back in the village, Sajida wasted no time spreading her final lie. She wept fake tears, telling the villagers that Zihara had run away in the middle of the night. She must have felt guilty for bringing bad luck to the family, she sobbed. Poor girl, I only wanted to help her. The villagers shook their heads in pity. Some believed the story, while others simply nodded in silence, unwilling to question the powerful woman. Baba Olumo, too sick to speak, could only close his eyes, unaware that his beloved daughter had been buried alive by the very woman he had trusted. The world moved on, and no one knew the truth. No one, except for the lifeless girl lying beneath the earth. Deep in the forest, hidden behind the thick trees, an old hunter named Jengo had been quietly watching. He had come to check his traps when he heard voices in the distance. Curious, he moved closer, hiding behind the bushes. What he saw sent chills down his spine. In the dim lantern light, he watched as Sajida and Tazira forced a young girl to dig a hole. Even from where he stood, he could see the terror on her face, hear the desperation in her cries. He clenched his fists as the cruel women pushed her into the pit and began to bury her alive. His heart pounded with anger, but he knew he was too far to stop them in time. If he revealed himself now, they might kill him too. So, he waited. When the women finally left, Django rushed to the freshly covered grave. He dropped to his knees and began digging with his bare hands, scooping away the dirt as fast as he could. His old bones ached, but he didn't stop. "Hold on, child," he muttered under his breath. "Stay with me." Minutes felt like hours, but finally, his fingers brushed against something. A small, cold hand. His heart leaped. He dug faster, pulling away the earth until he uncovered the girl's face. She was pale, her eyes closed, her chest still. "No, no, no," Django whispered, pressing his ear to her nose. For a terrifying moment, he thought he was too late. But then, faintly, he felt the softest breath against his skin. She was alive, barely. With all the strength left in his old body, Django lifted the girl into his arms. She was as light as a feather, her body weak from starvation and suffering. He knew there was no time to waste. The village of Maloo was too dangerous. If he took her back, Sajida would make sure she never survived. There was only one place she could be safe. Carrying her carefully, Django made his way through the dark forest, his feet knowing the path by heart. He walked for hours, never stopping, never slowing down. His destination was a hidden village, far beyond the reach of Maloo, a place few people knew existed, the village of Zundwa. By the time he arrived, the sky was turning a deep shade of blue. The villagers, startled to see Django carrying a lifeless girl, rushed to help. "What happened?" one of them asked, his voice full of concern. Django didn't stop walking. "Take me to Mama Lemba," he said firmly. Mama Lemba was the village healer, a woman known for her wisdom and powerful medicine. When Django arrived at her hut, she was already waiting at the door, her sharp eyes scanning the girl in his arms. Without a word, she stepped aside and let him in. Django gently placed Zihara on a mat, while Mama Lemba knelt beside her, feeling for a pulse. "She is weak," she murmured, "but she is not lost." She worked quickly, pressing herbs to Zihara's lips, rubbing healing oils onto her cold skin, whispering words of power as she did. Django sat by the fire, watching silently, hoping, praying. Hours passed before Mama Lemba finally looked up. "She will live," she said. Django let out a deep breath of relief. He had saved her. The girl buried alive had been given another chance. But now, a new journey would begin. Zihara drifted between life and death for many days. Fever raged through her weak body, and in her dreams, she saw the darkness of the grave, the cruel laughter of Sajida and Tazira, and the cold earth pressing down on her. But each time she felt herself slipping away, a gentle voice called her back. It was Mama Lemba, the healer of Zundwa, whispering words of comfort, pressing warm herbal mixtures to her lips, and placing cool cloths on her burning forehead. Slowly, Zihara began to heal. At first, she was too weak to even sit up, but Mama Lemba cared for her patiently. Django often sat nearby, telling stories of the land, of the strength within her, of the destiny that awaited her. The village of Zundwa, hidden deep in the forest, became her new home. The people welcomed her, treating her as one of their own, but she knew she was not like them. She carried a pain, a fire inside her, one that would never die until she found justice. As the days turned into months, Zihara grew stronger. Mama Lemba did not just heal her body, she trained her mind. She taught her the power of herbs, how to cure sickness, how to mend wounds, and how to read the signs of nature. "A healer must be wise, not just strong," Mama Lemba often said. "Strength fades, but wisdom will carry you through the darkest times." But Zihara did not only want to heal, she wanted to defend herself. She never wanted to feel helpless again. Django, the old hunter who had saved her life, became her teacher. He taught her how to move silently through the forest, how to track footprints, how to use a bow and arrow, and how to fight with her bare hands. She practiced every day, her body growing faster, stronger. When she fell, she got back up. When she failed, she tried again. Years passed, and the helpless girl, who had once been buried alive, was no more. In her place stood a woman of strength and wisdom, with fire in her heart and a purpose in her soul. She no longer feared the dark. She had risen from it, and deep in her heart, she knew that one day she would return to Maloo. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, a group of travelers arrived in Zundwa. They brought news from distant villages, speaking of changes, misfortunes, and fortunes that had shifted. Among their stories was one that made Zihara stop in her tracks. "Baba Olumo, the great herbalist of Maloo, has passed away," one of the travelers said. "His wife, Sajida, now controls all his wealth. They say she is the richest woman in Maloko. Zihara felt the world around her slow down. Her father was gone. The man who had once held her as a child, who had loved her before he was blinded by Sajida's lies, was no more. She did not even get to say goodbye. A deep sadness filled her chest, but it was quickly followed by something else. Determination. Sajida had taken everything from her. Her mother, her childhood, her home. And now she sat comfortably in Maloko, enjoying the wealth of a man she had deceived. The villagers, unaware of her crimes, probably respected her, maybe even feared her. They believed Zihara was dead, but they were wrong. She had spent years preparing for this moment, training her body, sharpening her mind. The time had come to return, not as the weak girl who had been buried alive, but as a woman who had risen from the ashes. She would reclaim what was hers, but more importantly, she would make sure Sajida and Tazira faced the truth. That night, under the light of the full moon, Zihara stood before Mama Lemba and Django, the two people who had saved her life. She did not need to explain. One look in her eyes, and they understood. Django placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are ready," he said simply. Mama Lemba, her wise eyes filled with pride and sadness, handed her a small pouch. "These herbs will protect you," she said. "But remember, strength is not just in your fists. It is in your heart and mind. Go, Zihara, and let destiny do its work." With those words, Zihara left Zundwa, her heart beating with purpose. She was going home. The sun shone brightly over Maloko as Zihara walked through the village gates, her head held high. She wore fine robes, woven with gold and deep blue, the kind only wealthy traders or nobles could afford. Her hair was neatly braided, and around her neck hung a simple pendant given to her by Mama Lemba. She looked nothing like the weak, ragged girl who had once been cast out of this village. She was strong now, confident, unshaken. The villagers turned to look at her as she passed. At first, they admired her beauty and grace, wondering if she was a royal or a foreign noble. But then, as their eyes settled on her face, whispers spread through the crowd. Some gasped. Others dropped the baskets they were carrying. "Is it her?" a woman murmured. "It can't be," an old man said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Zihara is dead." More and more people gathered, staring in shock. They had mourned the girl long ago, believing Sajida's tale that she had run away. But here she was, alive, standing tall, like a queen, returning to her throne. News of the mysterious visitor traveled fast, reaching the grand house where Sajida now lived. Inside, she and Tazira sat, sipping sweet tea, enjoying the comfort of wealth stolen through lies and cruelty. A young servant girl rushed in, breathless. "My lady," she stammered, "a woman has arrived. The villagers, they say it's Zihara." The cup in Sajida's hand slipped and shattered on the floor. Tazira's face lost all colour. "That's impossible," Sajida whispered, gripping the edge of the table. Her hands trembled, but the growing noise outside told her otherwise. The crowd was moving closer, and among them, stepping forward with slow, steady steps, was the girl they had buried alive. When Sajida's eyes met Zihara's, her breath caught in her throat. She had expected a ghost, a broken, vengeful spirit. But the woman before her was very much alive, alive and stronger than ever. For the first time in her life, Sajida felt real fear. The crowd grew larger, villagers whispering among themselves, unsure if what they were seeing was real. Zihara stood tall in the center of Maloko, her presence demanding attention. People who had once pitied her, who had believed the lies that she had run away, now stared in awe. Sajida and Tazira remained frozen at the doorway of their grand house. Their faces were pale, their hands trembling. For years, they had lived in comfort, thinking their terrible secret had been buried forever. But now, the girl they had left for dead had returned, and she was no longer a helpless child. Zihara's voice rang out, clear and steady. "People of Maloko, you were told that I ran away, that I abandoned my father, my home, and my village, but that was a lie." Her eyes burned with emotion, but she did not waver. "The truth is that Sajida and Tazira took me deep into the forest, forced me to dig my own grave, and buried me alive." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others muttered angrily. Sajida's voice finally found its way out. "She is lying," she shouted, stepping forward with forced confidence. "She disappeared years ago, and now she returns with wild stories hoping to take my home." Zihara did not flinch. "If I am lying, then let someone else speak," she said, turning her gaze toward the back of the crowd. "Someone who saw everything." A hush fell over the village, as an old man stepped forward. Django, the hunter who had saved Zihara's life, walked slowly through the people, his eyes locked on Sajida. He was respected in Maloko, known for his honesty and wisdom. "I was there," Django said, his deep voice carrying through the air. "I saw them dig her grave. I saw them push her into the earth, and after they left, I dug her out with my own hands." A loud murmur broke out among the villagers. Some looked at Sajida with disgust, others with rage. The weight of the truth pressed down on them, and the years of deception began to crumble. Zihara turned back to Sajida, her voice unwavering. "You stole my father's love, you stole my home, and you tried to steal my life, but now, your lies have come to an end." Sajida and Tazira looked around desperately, hoping for someone to defend them, but all they saw were furious faces. The people of Maloko had been deceived for too long, and now their anger could not be contained. The village elders gathered in the center of Maloko, their faces stern, as they listened to the accusations against Sajida and Tazira. The truth had been revealed, and there was no escaping it. The villagers stood around, their voices rising in anger. Many of them had trusted Sajida, believing her lies, but now they saw her for what she truly was: a heartless woman who had tried to kill an innocent girl. Sajida fell to her knees, her hands shaking as she pleaded, "Please, great elders, have mercy. She is lying. I only did what I thought was best for my family." But the elders were not fooled. One of them, an old man with a long white beard, raised his hand for silence. "We have heard the truth," he said in a deep, steady voice. "For your terrible crimes, betraying your husband, mistreating his daughter, and attempting to murder her, you and your daughter, Tazira, are hereby banished from Maloko. You must leave at once and never return." Tazira clung to her mother, tears streaming down her face. "No, please, where will we go?" But the villagers showed no sympathy. They had been deceived for too long, and now their hearts were hardened against the two women. Without another word, Sajida and Tazira were forced to leave, carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs. Dark clouds gathered in the sky as they made their way out of the village. The wind howled through the trees, and thunder rumbled in the distance. Sajida and Tazira struggled through the heavy rain, their clothes soaked, their feet sinking into the muddy ground. Ahead of them, the river roared, swollen from the storm. It was the same river where Sajida had once thrown away Mama Kalia's belongings, hoping to erase her memory forever. Now, the river stood in their path, wild and merciless. "We have to cross," Sajida said, gripping Tazira's arm. "We cannot stay here." They stepped into the rushing water, struggling against the powerful current, but the river was unforgiving. The water rose higher, pulling at their bodies. Then, a massive wave crashed over them. Sajida screamed as she lost her footing, her hands slipping away from Tazira's grasp. The villagers, watching from a distance, saw them disappear beneath the raging waters. The river swallowed them whole, carrying them away into the darkness. When the storm passed, the village was calm once more, but Sajida and Tazira were never seen again. Some said the river had taken its revenge, punishing them for their cruelty. Others whispered that it was karma, returning to them what they had done to Zihara. And so, the story of Sajida and Tazira came to a fitting end, washed away by the very forces they had once used against another. With Sajida and Tazira gone, peace returned to Maloko. The villagers, once blind to Zihara's suffering, now welcomed her with open arms. They had seen her strength, her kindness, and her ability to rise above pain. No longer the helpless girl who had been mistreated, Zihara stood tall, a woman shaped by hardship, but not broken by it. She chose not to live in the house that once belonged to her father. The memories of pain and betrayal were too strong. Instead, she built a new home, a place of healing, where anyone in need could come for help. She used the knowledge Mama Lemba had taught her, mixing herbs, treating wounds, and offering wisdom to those who sought it. People traveled from faraway villages to see her, not just for healing, but for guidance. Her presence brought comfort, and her words carried weight. She made sure no child in Maloko suffered as she had. Orphans were given shelter, the poor were fed, and the weak were protected. Under her care, the village grew stronger, kinder. She taught the people the value of justice, reminding them that power should never be used to harm the innocent. Over time, her name became more than just a memory. It became a story told around fires, a tale of survival, justice, and karma. Mothers whispered it to their children at night. Elders spoke of her wisdom, and travelers carried her story to distant lands. Zihara, The girl who had been buried alive had risen not just to live, but to lead.